Tonight, tributes pour in from around the world for Jimmy Carter, America's 39th president who died this weekend at the age of 100. The state honors planned for the Capitol and the National Day of Mourning, and the breaking news of a major hack at the U.S. Treasury. First, what we're learning about the events to honor Jimmy Carter, the plans for him to lie in state at the Capitol, President Biden remembering Carter as a dear friend, now set to deliver his eulogy, former presidents and world leaders honoring Carter for his humanity, mourners placing flowers at the Carter Center and his home in Plains, Georgia, his legacy cemented by his 4 decades of service after his presidency, working to eradicate disease and poverty. Steve Osunsami with the latest from Georgia. The details just coming in, the major breach by Chinese hackers, able to access some Treasury Department files. The mystery surrounding that deadly plane crash in South Korea that killed 179 people, nearly everyone on board. American investigators now on the scene. Images of an apparent bird strike just moments before the crash, now part of the investigation. What we're learning about the 737's final minutes. One of the 2 survivors speaking out about what he remembers. Britt Clennett from South Korea. Dangerous cross-country storms as the South recovers from a deadly tornado outbreak. A new storm system now heading east, just in time for New Year's Eve. Will there be a washout in Times Square? The new FBI warning after a series of burglaries of well-known athletes. The latest at the home of a basketball star. What the NBA and the NFL are telling players they should do. One day ahead of New Year's Eve, the tremendous security already in place. How recent events like the attack on the German market are impacting plans as 1 million people prepare to gather in Times Square for the iconic ball drop. Aaron Katersky with late reporting. Remembering Linda Lavin, the Tony Award-winning actress who also made millions laugh in the classic 70s sitcom Alice. And the thousands of lives around the world touched by former President Jimmy Carter, including one unforgettable moment.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening and thanks for joining us on this Monday night. I'm Mary Bruce in for David. We'll get to that major security breach involving the U.S. Treasury Department in a moment. But we begin tonight with the outpouring of tributes to late President Jimmy Carter. His life dedicated to public service before and long after his life in politics. President Carter died at his home in Plains, Georgia at the age of 100. President Biden declaring January 9th a national day of mourning when Carter's funeral will be held at the National Cathedral. The president delivering his eulogy. Mourners are paying their respects, many leaving flowers outside the Carter Center, some driving for hours. President Carter's work as a global humanitarian elevating the role of a post-presidential elder statesman. He will be laid to rest near his home alongside Rosalind Carter, his wife of 77 years. ABC senior national correspondent Steve Osunsami leading us off.
At the top of buildings across America and across the world, there are lowered flags tonight paying the greatest respects to Jimmy Carter, the humanitarian, the statesman, the president.
Minute of silence in memory of President Jimmy Carter.
From the halls of the United Nations to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, today they pause to remember him. The former president, who in his later life was a Sunday school teacher, died Sunday afternoon, surrounded by his family in his hometown of Plains, Georgia.
He was an honest man. I think his legacy would be his honesty, his faith, and in politics, that's kind of rare today.
At the Carter Center in Atlanta, where the family is asking people to send donations instead of flowers, people are bringing flowers anyway.
He's my favorite president. Favorite president, for sure.
The next several days will give Americans who wish plenty of chances to share condolences. There will be public viewings in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., and a state funeral next week Thursday in the nation's capital, just 11 days before the inauguration of the next president, Donald Trump. Our current president, Joe Biden, a longtime friend of the Carters, will deliver the eulogy.
He was a statesman and humanitarian. And Jill and I lost a dear friend.
Jimmy Carter was a Georgia peanut farmer who never forgot where he came from, a man of the soil and of the New South who took on Washington.
As a candidate and as a president, I'll never tell a lie.
By January of 1977, he was president.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
His critics will argue that his presidency wasn't one of the greatest, with challenges at home and abroad. But there is much more agreement that his life after the White House was remarkable, building homes for the poor, through the Carter Center bringing fair elections and an end to diseases in places around the world. And his true partner through it all was his wife, Rosalind, who he often described as his secret weapon. She went first last November, and he will be buried next to her at a place they chose outside their home.
Jimmy says, "Oh, we're going to be buried right there." And then they're both smiling and saying, "Yes, I saw this beautiful bluebird." Rosalind said, "And I knew that that was a perfect place for us to be buried side by side."
Tonight, members of the family are taking comfort in this editorial cartoon in the AJC, the Atlanta paper. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter are together once again.
Their reunion, a bit of solace for the family tonight. And Steve joins us now from the Carter Center in Atlanta. And Steve, how soon will the broader public be able to pay their respects?
Well, Mary, the former president's remains will be moved on Saturday, and then he will stop at the State House here in Atlanta, then here at the Carter Center, where people can pay their respects. Then he will head to Washington, where there is a public viewing at the U.S. Capitol. Mary?
Steve, thank you. We move on now to the investigation into that devastating plane crash in South Korea. American investigators are now on the scene. The pilots declaring an emergency after a bird strike. The Boeing jet then coming down without its landing gear deployed. 179 people were killed, just 2 survivors. Investigators are now trying to determine what happened in those final moments before the crash. ABC's Britt Clennett in South Korea.
Tonight, a team from the NTSB joining South Korean investigators to try and figure out what led to one of the worst aviation disasters in history. The Jeju Airlines Boeing 737-800 coming from Bangkok cleared to land at South Korea's Muir Airport at 8:54 a.m. local time Sunday. At 8:57, the tower warns of birds in the area. 2 minutes later, at 8:59, the pilots call, "Mayday, mayday, mayday, bird strike, going around." Investigators looking at this image appearing to show a flash and a puff of smoke, suggesting a bird strike. At 9:02, the plane makes contact with the runway with no landing gear down. 1 minute later, at 9:03, the plane crashing into that concrete structure.
We don't know what happened in those 4 minutes between when the crew declared an emergency and the crash itself. Why did they make the decisions that they made? Why land fast? Why land with the gear up? And why land so far down the runway they weren't able to stop the aircraft?
Jeju is a low-cost South Korean airline that has an impeccable safety record. The head of the airline bowing in apology. Anguished families flooding the airport. The youngest victim is just 3 years old.
There's a real somber atmosphere here, the tents which have been set up for the relatives, but sometimes the grief is so overwhelming you can hear wailing coming from them.
The only survivors, 2 flight attendants that were seated in the rear of the plane. A 33-year-old man telling doctors he doesn't remember being rescued. The other, a woman reportedly in stable condition.
Mary, investigators are still combing through the mangled wreckage you can see behind me, and the black boxes are partially damaged, but the cockpit voice recorders, they'll also help piece together what exactly caused this crash. They'll also be looking at that concrete wall. Was it too close to the runway? Mary?
Still so many questions to resolve, Britt. Thank you. Here at home, we are tracking storms moving from the Midwest to the Northeast just in time for New Year's. Rain is expected in New York City around the same time that the ball is set to drop at midnight in Times Square. Several deaths reported following severe storms this weekend, including a powerful EF3 tornado touching down south of Houston. So let's get right to meteorologist Greg Dutra from our station WLS in Chicago. Hey, Greg.
Mary, it's another abnormally warm day across the Northeast and in New York City, and that can mean only one thing, rain, as we track our next coast-to-coast storm system. So let's do that. Rain arriving early in Chicago, and that is going to switch over to some snow, but it'll stay mainly rainfall south of Interstate 90 and a soggy Times Square right around to after dinner time, but there is some hope. The rain could slow to some drizzle right about the time the ball drops, and don't count out the cold air locked up in the system. Look at the winds turn to the north and east. That means lake effect snow up to 2 feet falling on the Tug Hill Plateau. South of Buffalo could be up to a foot of total snowfall, and behind that, a dose of reality as wind chills in the Midwest jump into the teens or below zero, and highs in the Northeast are only in the 30s. Mary?
A potentially soggy and cold start to the new year for so many. Greg, thank you. Meanwhile, here in New York, police are on high alert heading into New Year's Eve. Roughly 1 million people are expected to pack Times Square to watch the ball drop tomorrow night. The ball there getting its final test before the new year arrives. Following, though, the Christmas market attack in Germany, the NYPD commissioner is promising a tremendous police presence. ABC's Aaron Kotursky in Times Square.
Tonight, with 1 million people ready to ring in 2025 in Times Square, the New York Police Department is positioning to keep them safe.
The public can expect to see a tremendous amount of police resources deployed throughout the area and across the city.
That includes thousands of officers, bomb-sniffing dogs, and drones. This year's security plan also reflects the recent Christmas market attack in Germany.
A vehicle ramming incident is why we have the sand trucks, the blocker cars, and all of the other resources that we'll have. So we are very confident it's going to be a safe and enjoyable evening for all.
There are similar preparations in Las Vegas, where 350,000 people are again expected on the Strip, and in San Francisco, where 200,000 will watch fireworks from the waterfront. Authorities say all of these events remain attractive targets, but there are no credible threats. Police are taking no chances, Mary. Manholes will be sealed up, trash cans removed, and spectators are allowed no umbrellas, bags, or booze. Mary?
Okay, Aaron, thank you. We move on now to a developing story. Tonight, the Biden administration is blaming China for a major security breach targeting the U.S. Treasury Department. Hackers gaining access to employee workstations and unclassified documents. Here's ABC's Elizabeth Schulze.
Tonight, the Treasury Department notifying Congress it was targeted by Chinese state-sponsored hackers in a major security breach. The department says it learned earlier this month hackers were able to infiltrate a third-party software provider, remotely log into Treasury employees' workstations, and gain access to unclassified documents. The Biden administration warning just days ago about China's threat to the telecom sector.
The reality is that China is targeting critical infrastructure in the United States.
Just last month, a China-backed group called Salt Typhoon hacked into 9 telecommunications companies, gaining access to the cell phones of high-profile Americans, including top Biden administration officials.
Mary, it's unclear if the two hacks are related. Tonight, the Treasury says it's working with the FBI to determine the extent of the breach on its systems. Mary?
Troubling development. Elizabeth, thank you. Now to the FBI issuing formal warnings to professional sports leagues following another high-profile break-in. Thieves this time targeting the home of an NBA star, stealing thousands of dollars in jewelry. Multiple pro athletes burglarized since September. Here's ABC's Trevor Ault.
Tonight, the FBI warning sports leagues about criminals targeting the homes of professional athletes. Dallas Maverick star Luka Doncic, the latest in the growing list of victims. Thieves reportedly making off with $30,000 worth of jewelry. His rep telling ESPN no one was home at the time, and thankfully Luka and his family are safe. The FBI says organized theft groups from South America target athletes' homes due to the perception they may have high-end goods like designer handbags, jewelry, watches, and cash, often tracking potential victims using social media. 3 weeks ago, thieves entered the home of Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow.
I feel like my privacy has been violated in more ways than one.
And burglars also targeted Kansas City Chiefs stars Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes.
It's frustrating. It's disappointing. I can't get into too many of the details.
Mary, officials believe these groups are well organized, conducting surveillance by posing as joggers or deploying drones. The leagues are urging players to beef up their home security. Mary.
Okay, Trevor, thank you. Tonight, President-elect Donald Trump is hoping to avoid a showdown within his own party. He's now fully endorsing Speaker Mike Johnson for another term ahead of a vote in the House this week. But Johnson still may not have enough support. Republicans with a razor-thin margin. And the stakes are high. Without a speaker, the House would likely be unable to certify Trump's victory. Here's ABC's Mary Alice Parks.
Tonight, President-elect Donald Trump throwing his support behind Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, saying Johnson has his complete and total endorsement in his fight to keep the gavel. Speaker Mike Johnson is a good, hardworking, religious man, Trump wrote on social media, urging fellow Republicans to get in line, writing, "Let's not blow this great opportunity which we've been given." Johnson has been facing pushback from the far right for weeks. Earlier this month, Trump ally Steve Bannon blasting the speaker for his willingness to work with Democrats to pass a spending bill.
Johnson's not up to the task, and he's got to go, right? He's got to go.
Should Johnson be Speaker of the House?
The vote is going to be close. Speaker Johnson can likely only afford to lose one Republican, and the stakes could not be higher for the incoming administration. The House will be at a standstill, likely unable to even certify Trump's election until a speaker is chosen.
Now, it's unclear whether Trump's endorsement will sway those fiscal hawks who've been angry at Johnson, but the speaker was still grateful for the support, writing on X that he's ready to deliver on Trump's America First agenda. Mary?
A critical test for the speaker and the incoming president. Mary Alice, thank you. The stock market is limping its way into the new year. The Dow losing 418 points today, closing at 42,573. That so-called Santa Claus rally after Christmas so far failing to emerge. And when we come back, remembering Linda Lavin, the award-winning star best known as Alice from Mel's Diner. And the tense moments during takeoff at one of the country's busiest airports. Air traffic controllers preventing what could have been a disaster. Next tonight, some tense moments on the runway at one of America's busiest airports. Stop. Air traffic controllers at LAX telling a plane to hold as it was about to cross the runway as a Delta passenger jet was about to take off. That smaller plane stopping just in time and did not cross into the runway. The Delta jet already in the air when it passed. And when we come back, tributes pour in for Linda Lavin, the Alice star and Tony Award-winning actress, has died. To the index now, and a passing to note. Tony Award-winning actress Linda Lavin, best known for her role as Alice, the hard-working single mom from Mel's Diner. The show ran from 1976 to 1985. She later starred in several Broadway productions and kept working, appearing in the new Netflix series No Good Deed. Her representative said she died Sunday of complications from recently diagnosed lung cancer. Linda Lavin was 87. And when we come back, a look at some of the thousands of lives touched by former President Jimmy Carter, and one incredible little boy in particular. Finally tonight, Jimmy Carter and what he did in the 40-plus years after the White House that changed the world for so many. It is perhaps Jimmy Carter's most enduring legacy, the thousands of lives he touched as a humanitarian, peacemaker, and visionary. He may have served just a single term in the White House, but Carter dedicated a lifetime to service.
We didn't know what we were going to do the rest of our lives, and we decided to take on projects that no one else wanted to do.
He and his wife Rosalind founding the Carter Center a year after he left office, traveling the world to protect human rights, democracy, and invest in public health, launching a campaign to eradicate guinea worm disease. Through his partnership with Habitat for Humanity, building, renovating, and repairing nearly 4,400 homes over 4 decades. The Carters right there building alongside volunteers.
The joy of what they've done over the decades to get this working and to have it grow like it has.
In 2002, Carter honored with a Nobel Peace Prize for his work with the Carter Center, a first for a former president.
We can choose to alleviate suffering. We can choose to work together for peace.
Through it all, Carter making unforgettable personal connections, like with Maddie Stepanek, the boy bravely battling muscular dystrophy, writing best-selling books of poetry that he called heart songs.
I need a hope, a new hope, a hope that inspires me to live. I write poetry and I wish to be a peacemaker.
He too was inspired by President Carter, and after months of corresponding back and forth, a moving surprise on Good Morning America from the man who touched so many lives.
You said someday you'd like to meet him?
Yes, I do.
How about today?
Any day.
Any day? Oh. All right.
Maddie and I have a real love affair. I really love this boy. I'm proud of him. I think he's inspired the whole country to remember what peace and love really mean.
Maddie, one of so many inspired by Carter. I'm Mary Bruce. I hope to see you right back here tomorrow. For David and all of us here, good night.
ABC's David Muir, the most watched newscast in America. More Americans watch World News Tonight with David Muir than any other newscast.